Hello, Year 11. This is Miss Brooks presenting a screencast for an independent study session in the final week of Term 2. This is focusing on the text To Kill a Mockingbird, particularly chapters 2, 3, and 4, to help students consolidate the knowledge they gain from reading, some of their annotations, and to help just prepare them for the holiday homework that's expected for this unit. So, a couple of things that I want to point you in the direction of. The first is this Prezi. If you click on the link, and I'll make these slides available, if you scroll down to the comments section of this video, you'll see it underneath. There is this Prezi, and it's taking a little while to load, so I'm not going to stay on here, but it's a great little introduction to the text and different elements of it. So I would encourage you, if you are still struggling a little bit with this, to go back and have a look at it. There's some really great things on there to get you going and consolidate some of the knowledge you've already gained through reading. So let's go back into the slides. Right, so chapter 1 recap. In my class, we've already read chapter 1. So this is just a bit of a review of it, and you're more than welcome to pause at this point and have a read. Quite a lot happens in chapter 1, and there are a few important moments and some important information regarding particularly the setting of a small southern town, which is Macomb, Alabama, and the people that are in that town and their religious focus, the kind of deep racism that exists within the South at this time, and where Scout, who's the narrator, her father Atticus and her brother Jem, where they kind of sit in the social hierarchy of that town. And it also introduces you to some of the other characters, for example, Boo Radley, who lives in the street and serves as a kind of important individual for the children to learn from about accepting people and the prejudice that you can show to different people, not just racism, but the way in which you are prejudiced towards other people. So, I've got chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4 summary here. Now, I haven't put key quotes because I'm just going to go through my scanned in book, and you can see what I've underlined there if you like. So let's go to that. All right, I'm going to try and go to full page. We'll see if we can do that. All right, the first thing I want you to note, and this is page 17, and it's chapter 2. The two main areas of focus in this chapter are the characterization, which is the building of characters, of Miss Caroline, the teacher, and the Cunninghams. So I'm just going to skip through and stop and comment on parts that I've underlined, so that if you want to do that, you can, or you might just kind of make note of it mentally yourself. It's up to you how you want to annotate your book. But Jem says, "We'll do like we always do at home," he said, "but you'll see school's different." And I think that's a good indication of how the Finch family home, where Atticus is the father and his kind of morals and ethics are quite different to the town of Macomb, Alabama, and generally the people of Alabama. He is quite an ethical and moral individual who is concerned about the rights of Negroes, and his fairness and his kind of values of equality stretch beyond the white community. So the fact that Jem says school's different is much in the same way that life is different outside of their home. Their home is like this little oasis. All right, then we're moving on. We are introduced to Miss Caroline, a 21-year-old who is teaching Scout at school. She's bringing in the Dewey Decimal System, and she has to sort out an issue that Atticus has obviously been teaching Scout to read, and she's said that that's not a great idea. Your father does not know how to teach. You can have a seat now. And Scout has to sit down meditating on her crime as if she had done something wrong. And it's just kind of a little lesson for Scout about the way in which you learn in the world. And Atticus also reflects on this moment when she gets home and they have a conversation about how you negotiate with different people. And what you can expect from people when they're new to a town and when they don't know certain things. There's this brief comment here, and this is just to do with setting, about the town of Winston, or Winston County, and its relationship to Macomb County. And this secede from the Union is in reference to the Civil War and the alliances that were occurring in the South, where slavery was the desired way of life, and they wanted to maintain that, and the North, where they sought to abolish slavery. So the people of Winston County were siding with the North, and as a result were not popular with the people of Macomb County, who sided with the South at that time. All right, so then let's move on. Scout says, I never loved to read. One does not love breathing, and just reading is a part of a way of life. And that's just a bit of characterization about Scout there. Her full name is Jean Louise Finch, but she is affectionately known as, or her nickname is, Scout. All right, then we've got a bit of commentary here about the relationship between Calpurnia, the maid, the African-American maid, and Scout. Scout's mother has passed away from a heart attack when Scout was only a little girl, and Calpurnia has basically been there since before she was born, and will carry on there for many years after, working for the family. And so she is able to treat Scout basically how she likes and punish her if she thinks she needs to, because she has that respect from Atticus. So in Calpurnia's teaching, there was no sentimentality. I seldom pleased her, and she seldom rewarded me. The kind of bit of an antagonistic relationship, but when Scout goes off to school, obviously they don't spend all day, every day in each other's pockets, and they become a bit kinder towards each other and a bit more loving and forgiving. All right, then skipping forward, and we're on about page 22, 23. The story of the Cunninghams is a really good one, and I think it's important. I've got orange here just to note characterization, or the building of certain families. And the Cunninghams are country folks, farmers, and the crash hit them hardest. And the crash is the 1929 crash, in which the stock market basically bottomed out, and millions of Americans were impoverished because basically employment had been hit hard. You had a really big itinerant lifestyle, people moving all over the country to try and find work, but the Cunninghams wanted to keep their land, and so they had to suffer through quite a bit to keep hold of their land and still kind of live and survive. And she makes the comment because Miss Caroline's tried to offer Walter money, and Walter obviously refused. He had none today, nor would he have any tomorrow or the next day. He had probably never seen 3 quarters together at the same time in his life. So just showing how impoverished his family was, and the kind of the family they were, in which she says the Cunninghams never took anything they can't pay back. They don't have much, but they get along with it. So Scout has a very mature understanding, and I'm sure you'll have gotten that from reading. There was a comment today that I would never have thought that when I was 7 years old. But remember, it's an adult woman writing this book about a young girl's perspective, so that's obviously going to colour the way that it's written. And it's also, this is an older text, so sometimes it can be written with a bit more savvy expression and greater sophistication or formality than maybe the text you're used to today. And just a bit about Atticus. Mr. Cunningham left. He said, Mr. Finch, I don't know how we'll ever be able to pay you. Let that be the least of your worries, Walter, he said. And just Atticus's kind of kindness to the people around him, knowing that they don't have the money, but they will pay him back, etc. And this comment here about them crushing them the hardest, but then wanting to maintain their land, says was willing to go hungry to keep his land and vote as he pleased. So with land, you were given the right to vote in those days. It wasn't just that you had to be a registered kind of citizen, you had to be a landowner. And that's important to him, and maybe it shows his pride in himself and his rights to do that. All right, and then we're moving on. This is the very end of chapter 2, and Scout has had to reprimand Miss Caroline, saying, you're shaming him, Miss Caroline. Walter hasn't got a quarter at home to bring you, and you can't use any stove wood, in reference to the fact that that's how he would have paid it back in the past. Miss Caroline doesn't understand and she hauls her up by a collar. You're starting off on the wrong foot in every way, my dear. Hold out your hand, and proceeds to pat her on the hand with a ruler without any force really, and the kids just laugh, and it's kind of a bit of a failure on Miss Caroline's front. Chapter 2, Scout is very angry at Walter and starts, rubbing his nose in the dirt. She's beating him up in the playground, and Jem invites him over for lunch and says, it's fine, come on over. They know they're family friends. And then we're skipping forward, and there's just a comment. Calpurnia had more education than most coloured folks. So that point's quite interesting, and that's possibly because of her work with the Finch family and the respect that they have for her as to why she is so educated and does have the knowledge that she does. She invites Walter over, and then she makes fun of him when he doesn't eat in the way that she would expect. And Calpurnia's pre-warned her before they even sit down that boy's your company, and if he wants to eat up at the tablecloth, you let him. And she said, don't matter who they are, anybody set foot in your house is your company, which means is your guest. And don't pretend like you're so high and mighty. So Calpurnia has no trouble reprimanding Scout when she has been quite selfish and has kind of abused her position on the hierarchy, and that hierarchy being kind of white folks at the top, poor white folks, then you've got your white trash, and we're thinking like the Yules here, you've got African American population, and then you've got the mixed race, and that is people that where you've had an interracial marriage, so a white person, an African American individual, and that's Dolphus Raymond's family is one example of that. Okay, and she says, like you were so high and mighty, you folks might be better in the Cunninghams, but it don't count for nothing the way you're disgracing them. If you can't act fit to eat at the table, you can just sit here and eat in the kitchen. So Calpurnia is educating Scout herself in the way that she has to behave as a kind of young, would normally be relatively, but compared to the Cunninghams, is relatively wealthy, young lady, and so she should behave accordingly. And that's just a bit of characterization there, but also the ethics of Calpurnia and the ethics that she is trying to instill in the children from what she has learned from Atticus as well. All right, and it says, we couldn't operate a single day without Cal. Have you ever thought of that? Again, the importance of her place there. Then we are introduced to a young man called Burris Yule, and Burris Yule is a member of the Yule family who live out by the trash or the tip in Maycomb County. They are what's considered white trash. They live off government checks. Burris's dad is, what's his name? Bob Yule, and he's an abusive man to his children. He also wastes his government check on booze and I think cigarettes, and they just have a lot of children. They're not able to look after them. So that suggests quite a lot about him, and that's what we learn in the next few pages, and why he's kind of so rude and disrespectful to Miss Caroline, the teacher. And one of the other little boys in the classroom turns out, ain't got no mother was the answer, and his paw's right contentious. So just a difficult individual, a hard down, mean one. That's what Burris is, but that's also what Bob Yule, his father, is like. Because Burris is the result of the way his father has treated him, it would seem. And they're an important family, and we're going to come back to them, but just make note of the kind of little details here that you learn about the Yule family. All right, and then we're skipping forward, and it says, first of all, and this is a little negotiation between, I think it's Atticus and Scout. First of all, he said, if you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll get along better with all kinds of folks. This is one of the most important quotes in the whole book. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. Atticus said, I had learned many things today, and so he goes through the lessons. But this empathy is so significant in this text, and Atticus truly embodies that, because he is the one that says you need to take the time to consider what it's like from someone else's perspective and appreciate that before you can cast a judgment about them. Until you understand what it's like to be in their shoes, then don't pass judgment. And then he makes a comment about sometimes it's better to bend the law in special cases. And that shows that Atticus is quite flexible, and maybe he doesn't like the hard and fast rules that he is forced to live by as a lawyer in Macomb County. Maybe he thinks that sometimes there needs to be some flexibility. And that's because the Yule children don't attend school, and Scout's trying to get out of school herself, but having not much luck. Yules had been a disgrace of Maycomb for 3 generations, so just an interesting line there. And that's important because Bob Yule and his children are central to the main storyline later on, so make sure you get that down as just a bit of characterization. They were people, but they lived like animals, another one. Common folk, another one linked to that. In certain circumstances, the common folk judiciously allowed them certain privileges by the simplest method of becoming blind to some of the Yule's activities. So Atticus's ethically, or his morals suggest that sometimes you have to ignore things. For example, the Yule family are breaking the law by shooting animals and catching the prey and not I don't know, however else they're supposed to. I think they're not supposed to use hunting and trap outside of the season. But Atticus has said, I'm hardly going to punish the children or take away their food when their father is using his relief checks on green whiskey. And, his kids are crying because they're starving. He's not going to deny them the ability to hunt and trap outside of season. Just basically, you need a compromise, and also you need to be empathetic to where they're coming from. And he's saying those poor children don't deserve to suffer just because their father is the way he is. Jem and I were accustomed, and this is just a bit of characterization about Atticus and the way he speaks, our father's last will and testament diction. So very serious, very end of the kind of road, biblical formality about the way that he speaks. So sometimes they have to ask for a translation. Sir, and he explains. And this kind of simple single sentence at the end, yeah, Atticus was right. This seems to be the crux of their father-daughter relationship. He is always right, and he's kind of the guiding light for her. All right, chapter 4. We're at school, and Scout comes home, and she notices in the tree a piece of tinfoil which has some chewing gum in it. She runs home with it and eats it. Jem, tells her she has to spit it out and it might be dangerous, etc., etc. Dill arrives for the summer, and just before that happens, they find another treat in the tree, and it's 2 scrubbed and polished pennies. They don't know how they're getting there or where they're coming from, but they just know they are there. Mrs. Dubose was the meanest old woman. So Mrs. Dubose lives down the street from Atticus and Jem and Scout, and she is a very racist old woman that has some lovely flowers in her front garden, which there will soon be an incident involving. This little bit here is the ethics of the children. It says finders were keepers unless title was proven, which means unless ownership was proven. Plucking an occasional camellia, getting a squirt of hot milk from Miss Maudie Atkinson's cow on a summer day, helping ourselves to someone's scuppernongs was part of our ethical culture, but money was different. So these little kind of seemingly insignificant steals that they're taking part in are not that important. They're acceptable, but for them, money is different, and you needed to return it. For example, these scrubbed and polished pennies, but they don't know who they return to, so they're not sure. Dill returns, and they like to play a game, and it's called Boo Radley, and there's this kind of background idea about these hot steams phenomena, which is explained back here at the top of page 41, and it's just kind of the spirits, and it's kind of cultural element of the Macomb's black community or African American community, and the way in which they talk about the spirits and the culture of their land, and how death's present is known, or the afterlife is experienced. It's just more of an interest. I'm not really sure I've got a lot to say about it in terms of a text response. Final note, Jem told me I was right. I was being a girl, that girls always imagined things. That's why other people hated them so. I've just made note of this because there's a few times the treatment of women comes up. I'm not sure this is a large point of comparison, but it's just something I've been taking note of as I've been reading. And Scout's involved in a little incident, and she's put in a tire and then rolled down the hill. And basically, when she's rolled down the hill, this is a game if you didn't know, and she falls out in the yard of Boo Radley. And despite she runs out screaming and gets away, da 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 da, but she remembers that someone inside the house was laughing, which suggests maybe that Boo isn't as scary as they've made him out to be in their game. All right, so that's my kind of brief discussion of that. You can go through these and pause if you like to recap on the summaries. But holiday homework. You need to read To Kill a Mockingbird and make your annotations. They should be centered around these three main themes and then just general points about setting, and these are the colors that I'm using. So prejudice and racism in both texts. So prejudice can be when you're in a different part of the social hierarchy, the social ladder, and you treat people differently because they belong in a different class to you. Racism is specifically about the color of your skin, so between the white community and the African American or the mixed race community. Then you've got power of the peer group courage. There are individuals who are able to stand up to the peer group and show courage, whilst there are others that are unable to and are too weak to. This justice, morality, and ethics is about individual beliefs and morals that guide them in their decision making, whether they be good or bad. So justice, morality, and ethics in both the positive and negative. And setting, particularly the opening and then some other scenes throughout, you will just take a little quick note of. Extension. So this will not be for all students. Everybody needs to do this, no exceptions. But there is the opportunity to do some extension, and if you are looking for an A, I would encourage you to do some of these. Basically, you need to prepare some paragraph ideas, and I'm going to step through it as follows. Your table would look like this, and then you would need to select two passages from the text and compare them, and I'm going to give you some ideas about what you could compare, and then you're going to unpack it in a bit more detail. So it would look like this. It's blank, and you can see the kind of little headings. I don't think these are maintained on every slide, but you'll see as we go along. All right, so I've picked, or Mrs. Hando, sorry, has picked a quote from page 27 of To Kill a Mockingbird and Act 1, page 64 of 12 Angry Men. The key theme is prejudice, and the two quotes are as follows. You folks might be better than the Cunninghams, but it don't count for nothing the way you're disgracing them. And then from 12 Angry Men, he's had a pretty terrible 16 years. I think maybe we owe him a few words. That's all. Now that's Juror 8, and I'm going to go and add a note about that later, but that's Juror 8, and this is Calpurnia. So we're looking at the theme of prejudice, and we need to expand on how that idea is explored in this quote. Walter Cunningham comes to the Finches for dinner. His table manners aren't all that refined, and he pours gravy all over his food. Calpurnia reprimands Scout for drawing attention to Walter's table manners, because in doing so, Scout is reminding Walter of his social positioning as a poor farmer. The stern lecture she gets from Calpurnia emphasizes the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. And you might say this is an important lesson that her father and Calpurnia try to convey to her throughout the entire text. Then we've got 12 Angry Men, so we need to expand on this idea here. Juror 8 attempts to persuade the other jurors to consider more carefully the facts of the case. He suggests that maybe we owe him a few words in response to Juror 10. In response, Juror 10 insists we don't owe him a thing. And I would be extending this to match this one, and I would be saying, why do we owe him a few words? And you might say that Juror 8, values all life and believes that regardless of the defendant's ethnicity, he too deserves a fair and timely deliberation. So it doesn't need to be rushed, but he should be given a sufficient amount of time for them to deliberate over the information they've received, and to really consider whether the best case was put forward. So you can just extend that one a little bit more, I think. All right, what's similar about these two texts in this moment? You've got both texts examine the importance of taking responsibility for our actions. So Calpurnia is asking Scout to take responsibility, and Juror 8 is asking the whole of the jury to take responsibility. He's driven by his own personal ethics, but he's putting that sense of responsibility on the whole of the jury. They also demonstrate how prejudices around class inform the attitudes of both Scout and Juror 10. So prejudice means, judgments, negative judgments around class, and that is the lower class of Walter and the lower class of the defendant. We don't owe him a thing, are similar in both texts. Then you've got differences. Scout as a young child unknowingly voices her prejudice against Walter Cunningham in a way that demonstrates how prejudicial attitudes can become embedded very early on in our lives. Whilst Calpurnia is able to change Scout's view of Walter Cunningham, Juror 8 is unsuccessful in influencing Juror 10's opinion. All right, here is a second example. It's all filled out for you, and this is focusing on the theme of justice. This is a quite frightened, insignificant old man. So this is from Juror 9, I believe, the old man, and he's talking about the other old man who was on the witness stand for the prosecution team. All right, and you can pause now and read through that if you would like. This is a blank table for you to copy and paste and use of your own. I would suggest that what you need to do is you need to do 3 of these in addition to your annotations. They don't need to be quite as detailed as the first example, but maybe this level of detail would be good. Now, some ideas. You could compare the setting of the opening 2 scenes. You could compare the theme of courage between Atticus and Juror 8. You could compare the theme of justice between Mayella Yule and the old man who testifies, both of whom are kind of seeking attention and seeking to be seen as important. You've got Bob Yule and Juror 10, who are both racist. And then you have, you might compare Jem and say Juror 11, who have a real sense of value and see the absolute importance of the justice system and how it should and can be fair. Not that it always lives up to that, but that it can and should be fair. They think that, a lawyer and trial by jury of one's peers, these are all safeguards that should protect people and provide them with justice. It's not always the case, as we know with the 2 verdicts, but it is a safeguard that exists nonetheless. So that's all I've got for you. Let's see, what are we up to? Oh, 27 minutes. We're doing okay. If you've got any questions about this, feel free to email me. As I said, these slides are available below. If you need any other assistance, contact your teacher. You need to have a go at a few of these. If you're looking for an A, you're going to try and do 3 of these over the holidays. If English is a bit tough for you and you're just trying to get by, then you are reading and annotating. Last comment I want to make is additional resources can be found on the S drive. If you go to S drive, KLA, English, I knew I'd spelled that wrong. KLA English year 11, and then I think it's TKAM and TAM. You will find the audiobook. You will find the films for both texts. You will find the ebooks. Now, I also highly recommend you get the ebooks because, or the iBooks, sorry, because if you open up iBooks like this, you can just jump into it and say you're looking for a particular theme or moment or character. You can just use this little search button here. It's a little magnifying glass, and you can type it in. So you might want to put in Dolphus Raymond, for example, and it will search and it will find, for example, chapter 2, and it will jump there and show you. Okay, and then you can go out and go into another text. So I've got the Year 12 ones, which I've been using, and Night's also on there too, if you wanted that. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, you'll also find a copy of the play. It's only a PDF, so it's not searchable, I don't think. Anything else, email us. We are more than happy to help. Good luck with these. Good luck with your annotations. If we see any other resources online that we think can help you, we'll make those available. Good luck, and I'll see you later.